If you grew up in the 90s, then you probably played these board games. And if you grew up in the 80s, and in the 70s, and the 60s. But in the last 30 years, board games have undergone a transformation. It's not just that they look better, these new games are simply more fun to play because they've been made following a new formula for what makes a good board game. There are clear-cut reasons why Monopoly makes people angry and the game of life feels unfair, and modern games have come up with solutions to all of those problems and more. It sounds crazy. Board games have been around for longer than Christianity. They're just some rules and bits of paper. But right now, you're living through a board gaming renaissance. Board games are better than they've ever been. And I'm going to give you 10 reasons why. Now, I'm not saying all old games are bad, and I'm certainly not saying all new games are good, but there's been a huge shift in how games are designed, and I think it's for the better. Let's get into it. We've all been there. You start a game of Monopoly one afternoon, and then end up having to leave it out overnight because you couldn't finish it before bedtime. Games are like friends. No matter how much fun they are at 8 o'clock, you just want them to leave you alone by 2 a.m. Modern games know that you've got your yoga class to get to in the morning and are all designed to not outstay their welcome. In Carcassonne, you take it in turns to place a tile on the map. When you run out of tiles, the game is over, so there's always 84 turns. It's reliable. It means you know you can fit in a game of it before you attend the opera at 7 or get to the gallery opening before they run out of hors d'oeuvres. Honestly, I don't know what you people do with your evenings, but you seem classy. In Ticket to Ride, the game ends when someone runs out of trains, and that predictability is a vital part of your strategy, knowing roughly how long is left and whether there's time to complete your grand plan or whether you need to change tack. It's a pressure that gives the game an exciting tension. Can you get it all done in time? Other games like Catan are a race to be the first player to reach a certain number of points. The end of the game is the goal, so every move takes you closer to it, which gives the game a crescendo. And crucially, the points you gain are fixed. In Monopoly and Risk, you can feel close to winning, then suffer huge losses, setting you back, which is not only soul-destroying, but can take you further away from the game ending. It's like being at the cinema and they rewind the film by 20 minutes. In Catan, your progress is safe. You can only march forwards towards an inevitable end. And we're all familiar with that. And modern games value the time they get to spend with you by making every turn fun, which is just not the case in older games. In Cluedo, you roll the dice on your turn and you move that many spaces. But if you can't get to a room, you don't get to ask a question, your turn is over. The other players are running around solving a murder and you're left role-playing as the dead body. A modern game, like Pandemic, will never let you have a dull turn. You can treat diseases and use your cards to fly around the board. There's always something worth doing. And every player is equal. Everyone gets 4 actions on their turn, rather than having your productivity governed by dice, which is the equivalent of being unable to walk to work because Mercury is in retrograde. Even worse is when games like Monopoly make you skip your turn entirely, because there's nothing quite like playing a board game as not playing a board game. Remember, this is fun brought to you by the people who taught children by putting dunce hats on them and hitting them with canes. Miss a turn, go straight to jail, don't pass go, don't collect £200. Old games are obsessed with you not playing them. And hey, I'm okay with that. That's not to say modern games aren't punishing. I love when a game hits me around the face and calls me stupid. In high society, you play as rich socialites, splashing cash on luxury items to get the most points. Each card is auctioned off to the highest bidder. The catch is that if you've spent the most money at the end of the game, you instantly lose. A rich socialite without any money is an oxymoron, instead of just a moron. It's punishment for being reckless with your spending. The crucial distinction is that it's justified. Monopoly dishes out its punishment at random, sending you to prison for nothing. In high society, you knew the rules and you did it anyway. You can't be mad that you got caught. A fun game encourages you to gamble by dangling a carrot juicy enough to make you want to risk it all. In Heat, Pedal to the Metal, you can make your car go faster by heating up your engine. But if you risk it too often, you'll cause your car to spin out. You can choose to be cautious, not take any risks, and you won't be punished. But if you never chase that dangling carrot, you'll never meet your full potential. Whereas Monopoly hits you with a stick no matter what you choose. You know when you play football with your friends and then halfway through the game, the worst player is forced to leave and everyone else plays on without them? No? Yeah, that would be miserable. So why does it happen in Monopoly and Risk, even poker? It's called player elimination, and if modern board games had a Geneva Convention, this would be a reason to send in NATO. It's just weird. You've come over for game night to play a game with your friends, and now you're sitting there waiting for them to finish as punishment for being bad at the game. You're not only a loser, but a loser with the next hour to think about it. Modern games solve the problem of player elimination by not eliminating players. It's a revelation. Much in the same way that I consider myself a modern man because I don't go around punching people in the face. Werewolf is a game from the 80s that has become so popular that it's played by the England football team between training sessions and by Hollywood actors waiting around on set. It's a bluffing game. Some players are secretly werewolves, and the others have to guess who the werewolves are to win the game. It's a lot of fun lying to each other and accusing people of being a werewolf. But what's less fun is that every round the werewolf will kill one of the players, eliminating them from the game. If that happens to you in the first round, you just have to sit there for an hour and watch everyone else have fun. Even if I'm still in the game, it's a buzzkill knowing that someone else in the room is having a bad time. That makes me a bad host, which is why I would never play Werewolf, but I would play The Resistance or Avalon or any number of other hidden traitor games inspired by Werewolf that fix that problem by not eliminating players. In The Resistance, you still have werewolf-type players that must hide in plain sight and convince others they're innocent. But instead of killing good players, they win by sabotaging missions. It gives you all the same feelings you get from Werewolf of lying and arguing with each other, but no one gets left out. And that's what we want, lying and arguing for all. And that's why I support same-sex marriage. It's not the only reason. Player elimination was a crude way to put players out of their misery. No one wants to keep playing a game they have no chance of winning. It's demeaning. If you've ever played someone that's good at Scrabble, you'll know what it feels like to be 100 points behind. It's what the generation who repressed all their emotions would call character building. I don't want a character. I want your 5-bedroom house. Modern games will spare you from that embarrassment in a few ways. First, scores are less wildly far apart. The best player wins, of course, but not by such a landslide that you need to skip town and change your name. One way games are balanced is with a catch-up mechanism, which works like the blue shell in Mario Kart, only given to the players at the back of the race, which they use to attack the car at the front to hold them back. In Isle of Skye, players gain income at the start of every round, which they use to buy new tiles to add to their Scottish island. And to help those lagging behind, the game gives you extra money for every player ahead of you on points. Having more money will help you outbid the other players so you can buy the best tiles and try to catch up. It's a benefit scheme that helps the struggling players stay in the game, because poverty is a downward spiral and it's no fun watching yourself get further away from the leader with every round. That's how Monopoly plays out. The rich get richer. If you come into some early luck, you can spend that money to buy more properties to make even more money, leaving everyone else powerless to catch up. And yes, I know it's intentional. That doesn't mean it's fun. If you love accuracy so much, go play an economics textbook. Modern games give players hope that they can still win at any point, even if that isn't necessarily true. Some do it by keeping the scores hazy, so you don't know you're losing until the game is over. It's some harmless gaslighting. And you told me you love gaslighting, remember? In Ticket to Ride, you keep your goals secret, so you don't know how many points the other players have until the end of the game. You might be miles behind, but you're oblivious to it, so you keep plugging away. Ignorance is bliss. And it makes for a better finale because no one knows who the winner is. It's like you're at the Oscars, waiting for them to read your name out. And you deserve an Oscar for that brave face you put on every time you lose. And this is why I don't play chess, because if I play against someone who knows chess, I lose every time. It's the same reason I stopped arm wrestling against Henry Cavill, and because he wouldn't shut up about Warhammer. And I don't want to be on the other side, destroying my opponent every time, because that's not fun either. Where's the challenge? The winner of a game of chess is usually the player who has played and studied chess the most. And that's because the board and the pieces start out in the same way every time you play it. Modern games can't be mastered with such precision because they're different every time you play them. In Catan, the island is set up randomly at the start of the game. That means there can never be a common strategy. Each arrangement will create a unique dynamic. In one game, a sheep will be scarce and worth loads. In another, they'll be worth nothing. You'll never play the same game twice, and part of the fun is in exploring this instance of the Catan multiverse, learning how it works, and using that to plan your strategy. Then once the game is over, letting it drift from your mind because none of it really matters. And next time, you get to start afresh, unencumbered by your previous lives. It's called variable setup, and it gives each play of a game its own character. With chess, you get one game that plays the same way every time. With something like Onitama, your pieces move in a different way every time you play, giving you 100 different variations. An experienced player will still have an advantage, but a newbie has less of a mountain to climb to reach their level. The problem with so many older games is that you never feel in control of your destiny. In the game of life, you will land on a spot that tells you you've lost your job, or had a baby, or won some money. It just happens to you. You don't have any say in it. It's like when your older brother would hand you a PlayStation controller that isn't plugged in and tell you you're playing the game. Modern board games give you agency. Every turn you make a decision that directly affects your success. In Sniper Elite, the board game, one player is secretly moving around the map trying to avoid getting caught. You have full control over where you go. If you want to walk right in front of the guards' noses, you can. If you want to sprint, which makes noise and gives away your position, you can. You'll get yourself killed, but you did it your way. That's the joy of being in control, is that you own that loss. You can look back at the end of the game and pinpoint where you went wrong. It makes you want to go back and try again. Whereas if your failure was caused by luck, what would be the point of trying to improve? And if you win, it feels more satisfying. You got the job not because you're the best looking or related to the boss, but because you made the best choices. In a world where it can feel like you have no control over anything, where life, like the game, happens to you, modern board games offer an escape to a place that makes sense, where you're in command of your destiny. And it's a world with options. In Monopoly, you roll the dice and land on a space, and you can either buy it or not. 2 options. And one of them is doing nothing. It's like being a kid, and for dinner, you can either eat your parents' cooking or you can go hungry. A modern game hands you a menu every turn full of delicious options that are impossible to choose between. In Cascadia, you're building a North American wilderness and filling it with wildlife. Each turn, you pick from 4 options. But then you have to decide where to place them. So there's over 100 different ways to take your turn. But it's never overwhelming because just like going to a restaurant, you had something in mind before you saw the menu. If you were in the mood for fish, you order the salmon. It might seem like the answer to making games fairer and giving players more control is to remove luck entirely from games. And yes, there's a whole genre of games like that, the most famous being chess and Go. But it creates a specific type of experience that if you've played chess, you'll know, an intense battle of wits. And those games are more prone to make players overthink their turns, slowing the game down in what's called analysis paralysis. They also tend to only work as 2-player games, so they're not suitable for groups. The truth is, luck is an important part of modern board games. It creates drama and excitement. But to be willfully confusing for a second, there's good luck and bad luck. In Risk, you send your troops into battle, then roll the dice to see if you win. If you keep rolling low numbers, you'll lose, and it can be really frustrating because it doesn't feel fair. You're supposed to be a military tactician. You've planned your assault of Australasia meticulously, but your guns keep misfiring. What's the point in planning a strategy if luck renders it pointless? Dice are like a bad friend. You never know which side of them you're going to get. They will let you down time and time again. But when they do occasionally treat you well, they make you feel special. A deck of cards is like a box of chocolates. And let's be clear here, Forrest Gump, you have an idea of what you're going to get. It's written on the back. In Clank, you're venturing into a dungeon to steal treasure. To move through the map, you're hoping to draw an explore card. But you don't always get what you want. Sometimes you'll draw a stumble card instead, which makes noise and risks you being attacked by the dragon. Luck plays a part, but there's a predictability to your deck. You know both cards are in there, and they'll both come out at some point. And that gives you confidence in what you're doing, which means you get more invested in the game. But dice themselves aren't bad, it's how a game uses them. The biggest change with modern games is when luck affects you. In Risk, you make your decision, then roll the dice and see what mood your bad friend is in. But in most modern games, you're dealt your luck first and then decide how to act. In the zombie apocalypse game, Dead of Winter, you roll your dice and then work out how to spend them. If you roll low numbers, you can't kill any zombies this turn, but at least you didn't waste an action trying and failing. Instead, you do something simpler, like searching for food. It's like the game giving you a forecast that your bad friend is going to be a nightmare, so you cancel your trip to the zoo and wait for a day when they're behaving themselves. Luck can still hold you back, but it's not so heartbreaking. The real reason board games are better now than they used to be is in a roundabout way thanks to World War II. In post-war West Germany, board games became an integral part of family life. No longer a hobby only for children, they were embraced by adults who treated them as an art form, reviewing them in newspapers alongside films and books. And they were given awards such as the Spiel des Jahres Game of the Year Award, which was started in 1978. And it gave publicity to the best games, which encouraged good game design. Tabletop games were also growing in popularity elsewhere, with Dungeons & Dragons in the US, as well as Axis and Allies, a simulation of World War II. Meanwhile, in the UK, Games Workshop introduced Warhammer. All huge success stories, and all focused on fighting and war. And for obvious reasons, the Germans weren't so interested in playing games about war. And this inspired German board game designers to think differently, creating games that avoid direct conflict between players, such as Settlers of Catan that was published in 1995, designed by Klaus Teuber. He was inspired by the history of Vikings settling the uninhabited land of Iceland. And in the game, you play as rival tribes, building towns, cities, and roads by harvesting natural resources. And rivals you may be, but you can't attack the other players. You can't destroy each other's settlements. In fact, you have to work together, trading resources with each other to get what you need. It's still a competition, but if you don't trade with the others, you won't prosper. Catan wasn't the first great German game, but it struck a chord like no other. It embodied decades of progress in game design in an approachable and appealing package. And to the rest of the world who were used to luck-heavy, complex, combative games, it was a breath of fresh air. Thanks to the early internet, word of the game traveled fast, and it was soon printed in America and coined, along with other German games at the time, eurogames. It was the start of a board gaming renaissance, and those early eurogames inspired every modern board game that has come since. The big success stories, Carcassonne, Ticket to Ride, Pandemic, Azul, Cascadia, all share the same ancestors. And they're all friendlier than the games we grew up with. Monopoly and Risk and chess are aggressive games in which you tear your neighbor down. It's not enough to score the most points, you have to bankrupt your opponents or wipe them off the map. And that's not exactly conducive to a pleasant Sunday with friends and family, is it? The biggest shift with modern board games is in how friendly they are now. You can't directly attack your fellow players, and you can't destroy their hard work. But they're still competitive. You can get in their way and steal points that they were hoping for. You can take the last slice of cake and you can rub their face in it. You just can't rub their face in it. And even when you do screw them over, it's never personal. In Ticket to Ride, you're racing to complete train routes on the board. And if I put a route down from Barcelona to Marseille, that might ruin someone else's plans, but it wasn't intentional. We're all fighting over the same space, and I didn't even know they wanted it. My focus is always on getting the most points for myself. Like an actor takes all the roles they can get, and that will hurt other actors. but they don't do it to spite them, except James Corden. The point of it isn't just to protect people's feelings, but to keep them invested. If you're putting thought into a game, weighing up the decisions each turn, and then someone comes along and pisses all over it, you question the point of it all. Why bother pruning the perfect hedge if your neighbor's going to reverse their car into it? And some games take it even further, giving each player their own personal bubble to exist in. In Sagrada, you're each building a stained glass window by arranging coloured dice on a personal board. The gameplay is a delicate puzzle that requires a lot of planning. It wouldn't work if other players could influence your board. And even if you lose, you get a sense of accomplishment from having built this thing in front of you. It's your own personal Sagrada Familia. Incomplete, not the best cathedral, but still beautiful. Another huge shift with modern board games is the rise of the cooperative game in which all players work together to win. The most famous is Pandemic, a game of trying to prevent diseases from spreading across the globe. You have to coordinate your movements to stop cities from outbreaking whilst trying to find a cure to win the game and save the world. The joy of cooperative games is in how they bring you all together, united against a common foe. They get you talking more than other games because you all need to be on the same page to have any chance of winning. And the feeling you get when you pull off a victory is incredible. If you've ever played an escape room, you know what it feels like. That's not to say there aren't aggressive games around anymore. There are more options than ever. You see, the best thing about modern board games is there's something for everyone. You know when you're at a party and you're chatting to someone you don't know, and they declare that they don't watch films or read books, and you shiver because you realize you're talking to a psychopath? Well, the same applies to people who don't play games. Board games are no different from films or books. They're something everyone can enjoy in some form or other. But one man's Dude, Where's My Car is another man's Schindler's List. If you hate Catan, don't worry. You don't hate modern board games. You just hate Catan. There are so many different types of games available now. Imagine any setting you want and there's a game about it. You can pull off a bank heist, bet on a camel race, survive a deserted island, be an outlaw in the Wild West. And for any situation, if you just want something simple to play with your partner, there are some incredible two-player games. Or if you like playing in a big group, even modern party games are light years ahead of Pictionary and Trivial Pursuit. This is Spieltag, a yearly convention held in Essen, Germany, where publishers from all over the world show off their games, and over 1,000 new board games are released there every year. In fact, there are so many to choose from that you'll need a guide to point you towards the best ones, so it's probably best you click subscribe. And I've put some links to my most helpful videos in the description below. Those are my 10 reasons why board games are better than they used to be. What are your reasons? Let me know in the comments. And I want to give a mention to this book, It's All a Game by Tristan Donovan, which inspired parts of this video. I've not been sponsored, it's just a really good book and worth reading if you want to know more about the history of board games, old and new. This video was funded by viewers, so if you enjoyed it, you can support me making more by becoming a patron of the channel at patreon.com/Actualol. I'm John Perkis, thanks for watching.